sure that the stock market itself does not have such fluctuations, so that it would reach the point of causing a stock market crash and a Great Depression that ensued. There are many regulations in place since then. We have no intention of taking those safety nets out of place for the stock market. And with that said, that would safeguard us from having another incident and period of time, such as the Great Depression.
Okay, now we will address the second issue of international affairs. I will let the conservative side address it first.
You want me to go first? Okay, so obviously, liberals have been extremely weak on this issue, not only with Cold War issues, which I believe we will address later, but you've also been very weak in international relations. Our hostages have been in Iran, in Tehran, have been, there's been no progress in that the American people can see. Every single American in the United States cares and wants to see those hostages freed. However, it's been months that there's been no progress and there's been no news in whether those people are ever going to be freed, whether they're safe. There's been a few occurrences where they've checked in on the people to ensure that they were all safe, and a few of them were released. Women and children were released in 79. However, there are still 53 hostages that are in grave danger because of the lack of effort on the liberal side under the Carter administration.
Addressing the Iran hostage situation, the Iranians have offered for Carter to pay a ransom for the hostages, which Carter then refused. And now they're punishing the hostages by threatening to kill them. That's 53 people that will probably not see their families again. But aside from the Iran hostage situation, I would like to address the Panama Treaty Canal signing. Carter has always perceived himself as a people pleaser. He wanted to please America. He wanted to do right by the Americans. The Americans did not like the signing of the Panama Canal Treaty. It was very unpopular, and he said we should not continue to negotiate. We should continue to negotiate with the Panamanians for sovereignty. He did sign the treaty, but it did make him very unpopular with the American society, which he may not get reelected again.
May I respond? How much time do we have to respond? You have 6 minutes. You go ahead. I'll let him first.
Okay, so you responded and said that, Mr. Oak said that Jimmy Carter was weak and not dealing with the Iran hostage crisis better, when in fact he did try using the Eagle Claw mission to kind of rescue our hostages in Iran. However, that did not work, yet it still shows progress that he is trying to do something. And also, you said that there are 53 hostages in Iran when there are actually 44. And in 79, they released 16 hostages, which were women and African Americans. And furthermore, if your candidate was in our position, as our candidate is, I don't believe that he would have handled it as skillfully as Jimmy Carter, considering that most of his ways of dealing with foreign international affairs consist with using nuclear weaponry and threatening to bomb a country due to the ideals that he got from Barry Goldwater. And speaking of the Panama Canal Treaty, as Kayla has brought up, the treaty was actually a way of Jimmy Carter being a peacemaker in terms of the United States connection with Latin America. And according to our polls, many Americans actually did like this decision. And furthermore, to show how great of a candidate our candidate is, Jimmy Carter was the main person orchestrating the Egypt-Israeli treaty, which brought together the first Arab nation, being Egypt, who actually identified Israel and is actually being very successful right now in
I want to first start with the Panama Canal Treaty. treaty, and that was that the Americans didn't like it, and that Carter is solely responsible for that. I want to remind the American people that a treaty requires 2/3 approval within the Senate, so 2/3 of the U.S. Senate would have had to agree to those terms in order to get that passed. So I want to say that first. In addition to that, I want to connect that back to the criticisms that people had of the Panama Canal ownership of the United States to begin with. The idea was that we extracted that canal primarily out of imperialist measures, to which Reagan and his supporters seem to have absolutely no problem with using imperialist measures, given his proclivity to using war and extreme measures in order to exact American justice. So we want to be absolutely clear on using that. The second thing that I want to be able to speak to on that was ultimately the Iran hostage crisis. Mr. Earl spoke very clearly on that. It is a tragedy, simply put, the fact that we have American hostages within Iran. Yet, Leah just brought up the efforts that have been made. The idea is that America needs to balance more peaceful approaches with more militaristic approaches. President Eisenhower saw that even after his incredibly inept handling and, frankly, other imperialist actions in Iran that have cost us this situation to begin with by getting the Shah installed and a democratic leader deposed. Reagan's arguing for just such actions, not only in Panama, but in other areas of the world that have got us into this mess to begin with. America needs to understand that we need to balance a peaceful approach, like we did in the Camp David Accords, with the more forceful approaches, like we did in the Eagle Claw, which unfortunately ended in disaster. But again, it's tough to armchair quarterback such decisions, not knowing how Reagan might have handled that.
Sorry. We need to give opposition time to address additional
And
statements.
can you please tell the opposition there's no yelling, because we did go over that in the rules. I just wanna make sure.
I would like to start off by saying about the Panama Canal Treaty, 2/3 of the Senate did agree, it did get signed, okay, we have that. But yes, Carter wanted to be a peacemaker, but if he wants to be a peacemaker, why did 59% of the Americans not agree with the Panama Canal Treaty signing? And then I would like to also go back to the hostage situation with my good friend here, Liera, stating that all Reagan wants to do is bomb and nuclear war. Well, presidents in the past, how do you think World War II got started? We bombed Hiroshima and we bombed Nagasaki. I think that's how you say it. Nagasaki.
And that's how it ended.
Yes.
That's how it started.
Okay, a president bombed
I don't think we can.
those Japanese cities. And some of those cities around them, they're still uninhabitable because of the radiation level. And for Carter not to pay the ransom for apparently 44 in the mid-40s, 53, Americans in Iran, I think that is pretty mean, because he tried something, it didn't work, but you don't want to go with the ways of bombing. It'll get our Americans back home, because I'm proud to be an American.
I would like to bring up what Liera brought up with the Eagle Claw. I'm assuming you're talking about the Desert One mission, same mission. That was an extremely embarrassing moment in American history for the Americans. Americans laughed. Well, Americans did not laugh in pleasure. Americans laughed in embarrassment at the total failure of that mission. 8 Americans were killed in conducting that mission. And with that said, the Iranians laughed at us as well. So that was a tremendous blow, I think, to the image of America. And we don't have room to have people having a weak image of us, which is exactly what the Carter administration has created for Americans during his administration.
Do you have a chance to respond, or is that it?
You have 2 minutes to go.
Okay.
Alright, so in response to you saying how our actions have reflected Carter's administration has reflected a weak view of America. Actually, that's not true. After the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, as that situation proves, Jimmy Carter responded with the Olympic boycott in 1980, which caused America to pull out of the Olympics in Moscow due to the fact that we did not agree with what they did in Afghanistan, which was basically siege, go into a country while they were in a civil war, and then not only go into a country uninvited, but also to kill their leader and replace him with another. So we responded to that by creating a boycott, and we have got 65 countries to go along with us, and that was a loss of money for Moscow in the terms of the Summer Olympics. Nobody was really watching that from America and other 65 countries, and that proves how America is still in power and not as weak as you say that the Carter administration has depicted America to be. Furthermore, the Egypt-Israeli treaty shows how much influence America has on outside nations, because it was Jimmy Carter who brought that together. And if America is so weak, they wouldn't have even gave him time to listen to what he had to say, let alone make this treaty. So, yeah.
To add on to these arguments, I think it's important to note that you're absolutely right in terms of the devastation caused by Eagle Claw and the actions derived there. However, by increasing U.S. involvement in foreign nations, by increasing our militaristic actions and, frankly, imperialist actions, we increase the likelihood of just such events. And that's absolutely what the Americans want to oppose. I also want to address Kayla's arguments of, it seems to be the argument there is bribes or bombs. Either approach is equally effective in dealing with powers there of providing bribes to the hostage takers or bomb them with nuclear weapons. So I wanted to be very clear on that point. In addition to that, when we're looking at the idea of people-pleasing, by establishing peace between two major countries of the Middle East, calling that people-pleasing, I think that's a gross injustice, not only to peace efforts, but I think it's a gross injustice to peace efforts internationally. I mean, that's like calling King.
I will ask that you keep the tone down and you're past your time on the subject. Now we'll move on to our third and final subject.
Oh, I can't respond to.
Time, sir.
All right.
We'll move on to our third and
Really
final
good
subject,
points.
which is war on society. We will let the liberal side take it first.
To be fair, we'll make sure that they get the closing statements on the next one. Okay. Simply put, we need to understand where Reagan stands on social issues. Reagan is seeking to turn back the clock a good 30, 40 years on social issues in regards to race and gender issues. One, many on his side of the moral majority want to outright outlaw abortion, make it a federal crime and even a constitutional amendment. Two, this is a man who opposed both the Civil Rights Act of 1964, an act that I remind you was one of the primary goals of the civil rights movement and the leadership of brilliant leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. that sought to end the Jim Crow laws of the entire South. In addition to that, he also opposed the Voting Rights Act, yet another goal of the civil rights movement. Meanwhile, he also spoke at the county supporting states' rights in the same county where two voting rights activists were murdered less than 20 years prior to that. Reagan stands so vehemently in support of the sanctity of private property that he argues that even the sit-in movements and the private property owners can simply turn away whoever they see fit because it's property over the interests of legal equality. And I'm not sure how exactly to defend such action. Simply put, we cannot afford to turn back the clock and basically to negate the work that's been done through the civil rights movement.
Okay. And also, Jimmy Carter has suggested a plan that will benefit people who have